You are lying down right now. Maybe in your bed, maybe on a couch, or somewhere quiet, somewhere you've chosen to rest. And if you're like most people in the modern world, you expect to sleep in one long, unbroken stretch. 8 hours, lights off, alarm set for morning. If you wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning and can't fall back asleep, you probably feel like something is wrong with you, like your body has failed some test. But what if I told you that for most of human history, waking up in the middle of the night was not a failure? It was not insomnia. It was not a disorder. It was just how people slept. Tonight we're going back long before alarm clocks, long before electric light, long before the idea that sleep was something you had to optimize and schedule and track, to a time when the night was a world of its own. A world with its own rhythms, its own rituals, its own fears, and its own quiet beauty. This is the history of sleep. To understand how people slept, you first have to understand what the night actually was, before we lit it up. Imagine standing outside on a clear night, far from any city, no street lamps, no phone in your hand, no glow from a window, just darkness. Real darkness, the kind that makes it impossible to see your hand in front of your face. This was the every night experience of almost every human being who ever lived for almost all of history. And that darkness shaped everything. How people moved, how they worked, who they trusted, and most of all, how they rested. In pre-industrial Europe, when the sun went down, most activity simply stopped. Candles existed, but they were expensive. A single tallow candle burned for only a few hours, and for poorer households, candles were a luxury reserved for special occasions. Wealthier families could afford to stay up longer, to read by candlelight, to socialize, to write letters. But for most people, darkness meant rest. The English even had a word for the moment evening came. They called it shutting in. Not just the shutting in of daylight, but the shutting in of the household itself. Doors bolted, shutters latched, windows sealed. Because the night was not merely dark. The night was dangerous. Thieves moved through the streets after dark, sometimes in organized gangs, sometimes alone, slipping through unlit alleyways, using what were called dark lanterns, where light could only shine through a single opening, invisible from the side. Roads were hazardous in ways we can barely imagine now. Rutted, unmarked, unlighted. A wrong step in the dark could mean a broken ankle or a fall into a ditch, or worse. And beyond the physical dangers, there were the ones people believed in just as strongly. Spirits, demons, and creatures that belonged to the dark. Many people went to bed afraid. They prayed before sleep, genuinely, fervently afraid, not just of illness or thieves, but of the possibility that the darkness itself held something waiting for them. Some kept a candle burning through the night as a nightlight. Others slept with weapons close at hand. Many barred every door and shutter as tightly as possible and did not open them until morning. Historian Roger E. Kirch described the pre-industrial night as a sanctuary from ordinary existence. But it was a sanctuary with teeth. And yet, people slept. Deeply and differently than we do today. The most remarkable thing about sleep before the modern era is something that has been almost completely forgotten. For thousands of years across Europe, Africa, the Americas, and across almost every culture with written records, people did not sleep in one continuous block. They slept in two. The pattern was called biphasic sleep, and it worked like this. As darkness fell, people would retire to bed, usually around 8 or 9 in the evening, shortly after the light was gone and there was nothing left to do by day. This first sleep lasted roughly 3 to 4 hours. Then, sometime around midnight, they would wake up. Not groggy, not panicked, just awake. They would lie quietly in the dark or sit up or move gently around the house, and after an hour or so of this wakeful quiet, they would drift back into what they called the second sleep and rest until dawn. This was not considered strange. It was not considered a problem. It was simply the shape of the night. The evidence for this is overwhelming. Historian Roger E. Kirch spent years buried in archives, legal documents, court records, medical texts, private diaries, literature and ballads, and found over 2,000 references to first and second sleep across a dozen languages, going as far back as Homer's Odyssey, written in the 8th or 7th century before Christ. It appears in Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, in Virgil's Aeneid, in the writings of Thucydides and Livy and Apuleius. It appears in a 16th century English ballad that includes the lines, "At the wakening of your first sleep, you shall have a drink made of the best." It appears in Charles Dickens, writing in 1840, a character starting from his first sleep and throwing open a window. This pattern was not a quirk of one time or one place. It was, for most of human history, simply how the night worked. And the science supports it too. In 1992, psychiatrist Thomas Wehr ran a remarkable experiment at the National Institute of Mental Health. He took a group of volunteers and removed all artificial light from their lives, replacing their normal schedules with 14 hours of darkness each day, the way a pre-industrial winter night would have felt. Within a few weeks, every single participant had shifted into biphasic sleep. First, sleep. A quiet waking period. Second, sleep. And during that midnight waking, Wehr measured something extraordinary. The participants' brains were producing elevated levels of prolactin, the same hormone released during meditation, the same hormone that follows deep states of calm. This was not just a different sleep schedule. This was a different state of mind entirely. So, what did people actually do during that hour between the two sleeps? Almost anything they wished. Some lay still and reflected on their dreams, which were believed, as we'll explore shortly, to carry meaning, messages, sometimes warnings. Others prayed. The Catholic Matin, a prayer service for the middle of the night, typically fell between 2 and 3 in the morning, perfectly timed for the natural waking period. Some read by the light of an oil lamp or a candle if they could afford one. Some sewed or mended or did quiet household work, adding wood to the fire, checking the bolts on the door. Farmers sometimes went to check on their animals. Brewers sometimes tended their fermentation. And some simply talked, quietly, in the dark, with a spouse, a sibling, whoever lay beside them. One 16th century French physician, Laurent Joubert, even recommended that married couples be intimate during this period. He wrote, that they had more enjoyment and were more likely to conceive. There is something deeply human about that quiet hour. No demands, no daylight pressing at the windows, no obligations waiting. Just the dark, and the fire if you had one, and whoever was lying next to you in the night. Now, if the rhythm of sleep was different before our time, so was everything else about it, including the bed itself. The bed, as we know it, a private space in a private room with clean sheets and a mattress designed for one or two people, is an almost entirely modern invention. For most of human history, the bed was communal, and the bedroom, as a concept of privacy, did not exist for the majority of people. In the medieval world, poor families slept in a single room, often the same room they cooked in, ate in, and spent most of their waking hours. The sleeping surface might be a straw mat on the floor, or a sack stuffed with hay, or simply a pile of cloth. If they were fortunate, they had a wooden frame, the earliest version of a bed. And on that surface the entire family slept together. There were rules, unwritten but understood. The couple in the middle, daughters on one side, arranged by age, youngest closest to their mother, sons on the other side. Guests and servants, if there were any, on the outermost edges. Privacy was not a value that applied to sleep. Warmth was, safety was, community was. Sleeping together was not strange or uncomfortable. It was simply what people did. When people travelled, merchants, pilgrims, soldiers, they stopped at inns along the road. And at those inns they shared beds with strangers. Complete strangers, people whose names they might not even know. There was an etiquette to it. You were expected to lie still, to avoid unnecessary contact, to take up no more space than was your share. But sharing a sleeping space with someone you had never met before was simply normal. Even among the wealthy, the bed was a shared space. The grand beds of 16th century England, elevated, curtained, carved from expensive wood, were status symbols, yes, but they were not private. Servants slept in the same room. Guests might sleep in the same bed. The idea of lying alone in a large, curtained bed would have felt not luxurious, but lonely. Every culture that has ever existed has had something to say about dreams. And almost universally, the ancient world believed that dreams were not random noise from a sleeping brain, but messages. From gods, from the dead, from forces beyond the waking world. In ancient Mesopotamia, one of the earliest civilizations to leave written records, dreams were treated with extraordinary seriousness. Dream priests existed, professional interpreters whose entire purpose was to translate the visions of the sleeping into guidance for the waking. Around 5,000 years ago, the Sumerians created what may be the world's first dream book, a compilation of dream symbols and their meanings preserved on clay tablets. In Egypt, dreams were understood as a place where the soul could leave the sleeping body and communicate directly with the gods. The god Bez watched over dreamers. Temple priests slept in sacred spaces specifically to receive divine visions. In ancient Greece, dreams were the domain of Morpheus, son of Hypnos, the god of sleep, who could take any human form in a dreamer's mind, delivering messages from the divine. The Greeks took this so seriously that entire temples, called Asclepions, were built as places of healing sleep. The sick would travel for days to sleep in these temples, hoping the gods would visit their dreams and reveal a cure. Hippocrates, the father of medicine, believed that dreams could be used to diagnose illness. A patient's dream was a window into the condition of their body. And Aristotle, writing around 335 before Christ, suggested that sleep was the state in which human beings came closest to pure wisdom, when the noise of waking life fell away and something deeper could be heard. In Norse tradition, Odin himself, the All-Father, sent ravens called thought and memory to gather knowledge from across the world, and that knowledge came back to him through dreams. In the Hebrew Bible, dreams carried the word of God. Jacob saw his ladder reaching to heaven while he slept. Joseph interpreted the dreams of pharaohs and changed the course of history. And in that quiet waking hour between first sleep and second sleep, people often lay still and did exactly what Thomas Ware's participants found happening naturally in 1992. They reflected on their dreams. Not as entertainment, not as curiosity, but as guidance. Not everyone stayed inside after dark. Some people had no choice but to move through the night, and some had learned how to make it their own. Night watchmen walked the streets of medieval cities carrying lanterns and calling out the hours. Their job was to spot fires, report crimes, and offer at least the impression of safety to anyone who might be watching from behind a shuttered window. In practice, they were often not taken very seriously. Shakespeare's Constable Dogberry Bandial from Much Ado About Nothing is one of literature's great comic figures, a night watchman so ineffectual that thieves walked past him without concern. But the night also had its own culture. Taverns and inns stayed open after dark, islands of warmth and light in the surrounding blackness. In Ottoman Istanbul, the royal palace threw enormous nighttime parties, lit by thousands of lanterns and candles and fireworks, visible for miles across the city. Street vendors moved through cities after dark, calling out their goods. Night markets existed in many parts of the world. And the night, as it always has, offered cover for things that daylight made difficult. Lovers met in darkness. Forbidden conversations happened by candlelight. Secrets were kept by the simple fact that no one could see you. In colonial New England, a courtship practice called bundling involved a young, unmarried couple lying together in the woman's bed, wrapped tightly in blankets, with their families nearby. The darkness offering a kind of intimacy that the daylight hours never would. 2. Everything changed in the 19th century. Two forces arrived almost simultaneously, and between them they remade the human relationship with night. The first was the Industrial Revolution. Factories needed workers at fixed times. Shifts ran by the clock, not the sun. Efficiency became the dominant value, and sleep, with its slow rhythms and its quiet midnight hours, did not fit neatly into a factory schedule. The Industrial Revolution brought with it a new idea, one that would have been incomprehensible to earlier generations. The idea that sleep was, essentially, wasted time. Hours spent lying in the dark were hours not spent producing. The two-sleep pattern, with its quiet waking hour in the middle, began to be seen not as natural rest, but as inefficiency. And alongside this came the light. Gas street lamps arrived in London in 1807. By 1823, nearly 40,000 lamps lit more than 200 miles of city streets. For the first time in human history, the darkness retreated. Streets that had been impenetrable after sunset were now navigable, visible, safer. And with safety came extension. People stayed up later, worked later, socialized later. And when they finally went to bed, they slept, or tried to sleep, in one long block to be ready for the morning shift. The references to first and second sleep began fading from historical records in the late 1600s, starting with the upper classes of Northern Europe, filtering slowly down through society over the next 2 centuries. By the time Thomas Edison's electric light bulb arrived in 1879, the old pattern of sleep was already nearly gone. Electric light finished the work that gas had started. The night was no longer dark, and the way humans slept, unchanged for thousands of years, changed. Here is a strange coincidence worth sitting with. Sleep maintenance insomnia, the condition of waking up in the middle of the night and being unable to fall back asleep, barely appears in medical literature before the 1800s. It appears quite suddenly at exactly the same time that references to first and second sleep disappear. What had been for thousands of years the most natural thing in the world, waking in the quiet middle of the night, became almost overnight a disorder, a symptom of failure. We didn't fix our sleep. We changed what we expected of it. Americans now report sleeping markedly less than they did 80 years ago. Children in 1905 slept an average of an hour more per night than children in 2008. The 24-hour society, lit, connected, always available, has pushed sleep later, compressed it shorter, and trained us to feel guilty when our bodies behave in ways they were designed for thousands of years. In Thomas Veer's experiment, when participants were given 14 hours of darkness, they didn't just return to 2-phase sleep. They reported feeling more rested than they had in years. More alert, more calm. Their bodies had simply been given the space to do what bodies have always known how to do. We're not so far from those people in the candlelit dark. Not really. The same biology that woke a medieval farmer at midnight is alive in you right now. The same rhythms that governed the 2 sleeps of ancient Greece are still written somewhere deep in your body. We have built a world that runs counter to those rhythms, brighter, faster, louder, longer. And in doing so, we have forgotten that the night was once something other than time to be got through. That it had its own texture, its own customs, its own kind of quiet. The next time you wake at 2 or 3 in the morning and lie there in the dark, your mind drifting, you might not be broken. You might just be remembering something very old. Something your ancestors knew without being told. That the night is long enough for 2 sleeps. And something quiet in between. Sleep well.